Thank you all for tuning into the Carolina Business Leaders Podcast, where we share the stories of local impact makers who carve their path through perseverance, passion, and what I like to call Carolina grit. Today's guest is Michael Sharpton, Regional President of the Carolinas for Encore Bank, a fine tailored concierge-style bank that recently opened its newest location here in Greenville, South Carolina. So, Michael, thank you so much for joining us today.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah. So, when was the bank here open? I remember the opening party, it was about a year ago, a little over that.
That's right. So it's a little bit of a trick question. Okay. We were here for about 3 years before we actually opened.
I did not know that. Okay.
So as you can imagine, it's hard to build a bank without brick and mortar. But it was really important for us to find the perfect location.
Gotcha.
So it took us a while to do that.
If you're running a small to mid-sized business, you know there's simply not enough hours in a day to take care of all of your business needs. From managing health insurance to payroll, procurement, advertising, you're going to need some help to get that initial momentum going. That's why I would partner with Questco. They take care of all the behind-the-scenes administrative and HR work, letting you focus on what truly matters, which is running your business. That's Questco, Questco. Visit Questco.net or call your local Questco representative Thomas Owens at 864-477-0843 to get started today.
So meanwhile, we opened other branches across the Carolinas. So we opened Charleston, Charlotte, and Winston-Salem. And so we were able to do business out of those offices while I had a very small team here in Greenville.
So y'all have been pretty busy the past couple of years.
We have.
Those are all within the last 3 years?
That's right. So August of this year will be 4 years for me.
Nice.
And so I was tasked with building out the Carolinas. And so, like I said, we started in Charleston and Charlotte, built out teams and offices there, then went to Winston and then to Greenville. The thought was, transparently, I would be on the road a bunch for a few years and then get to sit here for a few years while overseeing the newest market, which Greenville.
Nice. So I guess for our listeners, could you give us a little take on what makes Encore Bank so special and different from other banks around?
Sure. So let me admit, at first, banks are not innovation experts. There's not much new under the sun, as the saying goes. So as far as banking, we are a standard commercial bank, and we also have retail consumer. But I'll tell you where the differences are, and it's really we're sort of a hybrid. It's really a split between two things that are essentially banking. Okay. Number one is old-fashioned relationship banking. So
Definitely.
We make a lot of local decisions. We have small teams with a lot of authority to do what is common sense, and as long as the regulators allow it, we try to make common sense decisions. That local decision making is powerful because there's not a chain of command that you have to go through. It's the team that knows the most making the decisions. Secondly, in relationships, which most businesses founded on that, is knowing who to call. So we don't have 800 numbers, we don't have calling trees and automated systems. You're calling cell phones. You're talking to real people who can give you answers.
Quickly.
Quickly, that's right. And I say a lot of times, we don't say yes all the time. That doesn't mean yes. But a quick no sometimes is just as valuable.
Absolutely, yeah.
So we empower our people to say, we're not the right bank. So that's one half of the bank, is old-fashioned relationship, doing business with people you know. We hire veteran teams, so we know what we're doing. But the other part of it is the interesting part. Banking has changed radically, and you see announcements every week about banks opening branches and branches and branches. The reality is, people are not going in bank branches anymore. That traffic is dying very quickly. Most things you need to do can be done from your cell phone.
Yeah. Right.
So what we've done is we do one location in every market. We make it a high-profile location, so we're downtown Greenville, right across from the stadium.
Yeah, beautiful location.
So it's a great building. We've got a big garage door. It doesn't look like a bank. We host a lot of events there. But instead, what we do with the money is we invest in technology. So we make sure that our platform, whether that's app or things you never see that are behind the scenes, are cutting edge, and they're as good as most big banks. And the reason for that is, again, we're not building offices, so we're saving money there. But also, that's how people want to be banked. They want to be able to do everything from their phone that they can. And then, obviously, with all the regulations, the Patriot Act, and knowing your customer, it's important to have the best stuff. If you have to open an account and sit while someone in the back office looks at an Excel spreadsheet to find out if you're on a terrorist watch list. That takes too much time. Yeah. So we do all that in seconds with our technology.
Nice.
So that's kind of a hybrid bank to me. Is it's not an online bank, although our online presence is good, but we've hired old-fashioned relationship bankers to go deliver the bank how people want it delivered.
And I'll add too, we had the experience of going over to your new location for the grand opening party. It was so fun. Ice cream machine, I mean the whole 9 yards. That was cool. But I'm sure there were challenges in building out all these branches in the Carolinas, but with Greenville specifically in that location, what challenges or anything you had to overcome with establishing that location and getting it open?
Sure, absolutely. So the first is, as you can imagine, there are a lot of cities across the country that have a ton of office space available. Greenville is not one of them.
Right.
So we really struggled to find the perfect location because if you only have one, I've always said the thing you've got to be able to do is describe how to get there in a sentence or two. And if I need to describe directions and it takes me a paragraph or 5 minutes to do it, we're not in the right place.
Right.
So we had to wait and find the right spot. I think other than that, once that came together, we love where we are.
Sure.
It took off from there. The second challenge is what any build is, and it's people. The people are the most important thing. So really had to leverage relationships of mine going back a couple of decades, frankly. And so most of our team, we had worked together some portion of the last 10 years, but 15 years ago. Yeah. So a lot of these people I had not talked to regularly for a while. So once we decided on Greenville and once we decided on that location in particular, we really ramped up the staffing. So before we found the location, there were only 3 of us.
Wow.
That is wild, yeah.
And now how many people are in the Greenville branch?
So now we have 7.
Okay.
Nice.
And about to add an 8th, actually, and probably by the time this hits.
Nice. That's awesome. Perfect timing.
Yes.
But I guess going back to you and your role as the regional president, what does your day-to-day look like? What are some of the maybe the fires you have to put out, or what are some of your daily routines when you get to that level?
And where are you located too? Sometimes you're in Greenville, sometimes you're elsewhere. So what does that look like?
I'm absolutely in the truck a lot, and I still do the same thing. So the days all are very different, and frankly, I wouldn't have got into this business if it wasn't like that. Gotcha. So early on, we raised capital in every market we went to. So that was a lot of capital conversations. A lot like this, sitting down with people, 1 off, 2 off. We didn't rent big ballrooms or hire fundraisers. We did it ourselves, sort of grassroots. So early on, it was a lot of that. Once we were established and went through this couple of capital raises, what my days look like now obviously depends on where I am and the customers. I still go on a lot of sales calls. I still enjoy meeting people, whether it's prospects or current customers. So when I'm in the other markets, when I'm in Charleston, Charlotte, or Winston, the teams there usually stack my calendar up. So I'm checking email and returning voicemails in between meetings. We do a lot of coffee meetings. Oddly enough, I do not even drink coffee, but I have, a ton of coffee meetings. So,
which the best part about that is the first time Michael and I ever met, we met at Spill the Beans for coffee, and neither of us drink coffee. So it was an early morning meeting, and we both got water.
That's right.
You're just taking Gil's advice. He talks about always getting coffee with people.
Yeah.
Great. Because if the conversation's going poorly, you can leave. But if it's going great, you can get another cup of coffee or another cup of hot chocolate for you.
Yeah. That was someone else we had on the podcast. They encouraged us. So
that's right. You literally never waste a coffee. I mean, it's just always worth doing it. But I do always support them. I usually buy a chocolate chip cookie or a bottle of water or something I've got a sweet tooth. So I do always buy something. But I think past the customer interaction, there's always internal meetings to do, making sure that we are bubbling up issues that happen to our office back in Arkansas, our local team. So there's a lot of communication around what's working, what's not. And to stay close to what's going on in every market, you have to have conversations. You have to get in the market. You have to have coffees and lunches and happy hours and ice cream cones with people to find out what their business is facing and how we can help them. Because essentially that's what it is. As I already mentioned, banking is banking. Most all of us have the same products. It becomes about the people and about the execution.
Have you always been so relationship focused?
I have, totally have. Yes, the whole time. In fact, I would tell you that, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this at some point when I look to hire people, what I look for. But yes, I think relationship is the biggest part of it.
Gotcha.
I had a boss early in my career that really identified something that resonated with me, that it's really the people. You can teach them the skills and the trades and the processes and the procedures, especially in a regulated industry where you've got a lot of that kind of scripted out. It's about the relationship and it's about execution, because people, as long as they know what to expect in a rough timeline, will stick with you and they'll be loyal back to you. But anytime you get into the dangerous part of overpromising and under-delivering, in our industry, you're sunk because there's too much competition.
Yeah. So being so relationship focused, is it hard to build out strong relationships in areas that are farther away, like Charleston, like Winston, when it's a 3-hour drive or so?
So I will tell you, no, it's not.
Nice.
But that comes with a caveat.
Yeah.
You've got to be in the markets. So it is hard if your intention is to go one time for a night or for a week, it doesn't really matter, and then never go back and try to do it on phone or social media or mailings or even handwritten cards. You've got to do it in person. So I've been a big believer in that. That's why I say I always am willing to get in the truck and travel and sit in front of people, because that's where you deliver that, frankly. And that's where you build that relationship.
Definitely.
And we see that across banking, but it's really any business. Is if you were in another city, so a lot of South Carolina and the upstate is covered from Atlanta and Charlotte, and the biggest mistake those companies make is never coming to the market and not knowing the market. So I'm committed to that. I always have done that in my career. This is awesome because I don't fly to the Northeast. I'm a 3 to 3.5 hour drive from home at any given point.
That is nice. Yeah.
If I am needed, work or family, then it's
you can get there immediate. That is nice.
That's right.
That's great. So have you always been in banking, or what does your career journey look like?
No, I have not. In fact, I would tell you I still don't believe I'm a banker. That's unusual for me. But no, I started actually on the leasing side of things. Back, I'm obviously old, back when FASB 13 and off-balance sheet leasing was done. So I come from that environment, more of an equipment finance, and working for a couple of manufacturers before I got into banking. The natural progression was you deal with a lot of banks as a manufacturer because you sell your paper and your leases to banks. And so I formed a good relationship with a bank a long time ago, over 20 years ago, and they asked me to come on. And so that's how I got in.
Okay.
Gotcha. Nice.
Got kind of indirectly, not the traditional path.
Yeah.
Did
Well,
you?
you
Sorry,
got-
I was just gonna say, did you know you wanted to be in banking or finance or something with numbers when you were younger, high school, maybe college?
No, absolutely not. I do not enjoy numbers. I like the relationship
Okay.
part of things.
Sure.
But no, I was not. I was a history buff.
Okay.
I also am a history buff. She does not like history.
Yes, I read the most boring books to most people. I do not read any fiction. I love reading about historical figures or events. And so, no, I thought I was going to go to law school. And
Really?
I was going to go the half law, half political route.
Nice.
I wanted to be a city planner or city manager. I worked for a company in Birmingham, Alabama, in school called Operation New Birmingham that found new uses for vacant buildings. So back before all the regeneration of old buildings downtown, that's what I thought I wanted to do.
What drew your interest in that at a young age?
You know, I think I can't really tell you what did.
Okay.
I
Just
think
naturally.
just natural. I loved it. I liked the idea of servant leadership, and so. You know, when you're young, you think of government as one of the ways to do that. Now that I'm older, I know that you actually accomplish even less than you would like to going down that way. And I have some friends in politics, and of course, I mean no disrespect to them, but that's what I thought I wanted to do. But you know, life alters things, and so I came out of college. Did not want to go to law school, did not want to pay for that, did not want to ask my
So you
parents
went
to help
going
that.
into college thinking law school. Then okay, nice.
And then I changed.
Yeah.
And so worked a handful of jobs in college.
And you were a history major?
I was a public administration major.
Okay, gotcha.
So-
just history on the side.
Just history on the side,
Gotcha.
history minor, and most of my electives were history. But I felt like public administration was the way to get into the city government
Gotcha.
level.
So then what was your first job when you did graduate?
So I worked for Enterprise Rent-A-Car, which at the time was a family-owned car rental company. They also took a little bit of a different approach to rental cars. When you say that, now you think flying into an airport, picking up a car and going. That was not their model. In fact, they were very rarely at airports.
Okay.
Our model is what we did at the time was insurance replacement business. So if you wrecked your car and the body shop was going to keep it for 3 weeks, Enterprise wanted to rent you a car. And how that ties in to my career is, one, they gave you a lot of responsibility at a very young age. So I graduated, I worked there during college and graduated as an assistant branch manager right off the bat.
Wow.
And we managed a P&L and a balance sheet. We had to keep the cars in good shape.
That's good experience at a young age.
Well,
You're learning how to run the business.
Well, you did. And we dealt with cash back then.
Yeah.
You did all your marketing. So we would do donut drops every Friday to insurance agents and body shops, because what we wanted was that body shop, when they got a customer, to recommend us.
Definitely. So you're building relationships.
Building relationships. That's right. Very sales oriented.
Yeah.
And then obviously you also learned to sell damage waiver insurance and things like that, where there were sales metrics and stack rankings and commission checks. And so that's how I got into leasing, is from doing rental cars, which, it took me a long time to get over that coming out of college with a degree in renting cars. That was not what I thought I wanted to do.
That's fair. Yeah. Did you ever have the idea of pursuing some kind of like history, working at the Smithsonian or something like that?
I did, but what I would tell you is I think the grind of being a professor or a museum job and how long you have to pay your dues for so little income, the fact that you do need to live in a very big city, most likely, DC or New York or Boston. None of that appealed to me. I grew up in South Georgia, so I'm a little bit of a small town guy, even though we've lived a lot of places.
Yeah.
We can understand that and relate to that. So it sounds like through your career, though, and the different roles and jobs you've had, they've all kind of contributed to the role that you're in now, working with people and managing a business. So which jobs throughout your career do you feel like helped prepare you the most for the role that you're in today?
Sure. Listen, I think when you're in the moment, you don't see the path very clearly. And now when I can look back, I do. I see the path. Nice. And I think I have to give Enterprise a lot of credit. Yeah. They taught you how to run a business, how to manage a P&L.
That really is sweet at a young age.
It is. Yeah. And you benefited from selling the cars at car sales. We'd work car sales on the end of the week, once a month, every now and then, and you benefited. You got commission checks from selling cars. You had to keep them in good shape. You learned how to sell and market. And it was a high pressure environment too, because the irony of rental cars, and this gets into a Seinfeld quote, but is you want to run an operation with no cars at the place, but yet when people show up, you need to have them a car. Yeah. So you have to juggle that, because you don't make money with cars sitting in the lot. Right. So that was probably the first place that taught sort of the P&L, knowing that we're in business to make money and that you are responsible for making money if it's your branch. The second thing was a very high customer service satisfaction. That was super important. Me, as a recent college grad, I could waive. If you rented a car from me and you came in and were not happy, I could waive 2 days without going to my boss.
Okay, nice.
So I learned,
you had freedom with that.
I had freedom. I learned that importance of empowering people on the ground, no matter their position, but also making sure that the customer's experience was great.
Nice.
So I think that was one of the first. The other one I will share is that directly after that, I went to a Terex final stage manufacturing company. Back then it was called Combatel. Again, a family-owned business that built bucket trucks. And
what is a bucket truck?
So a bucket truck is what you see people working on power lines before and after storms.
Yeah.
So before storms come, you see a bunch of them going down the interstate.
Yeah.
So before you're aware of those, you never really notice them. But
I never noticed them until the hurricane about a year ago. Right. They were all over the place.
Yeah, they had the Haywood Mall parked with thousands of those trucks.
Yeah.
That's right. So that was another place where I was given a lot of responsibility early in my career, They did a joint venture with Asplund Tree Company where they rented and leased bucket trucks to small contractors all the way up to like Alabama Power and SCNG. So I got a lot of experience flying to Tampa and presenting to Florida Power and Light. I got to structure a lot of rental contracts for short-term rental for bucket trucks for storm stuff. Got to meet with a lot of power line contractors out in the Midwest and really sort of propped up a lot of what we did because it was transitioning from writing a check to buy a bucket truck to making a monthly payment. And the power companies could make their budget last longer if they made monthly payments and not paid cash for trucks.
So you talked about presenting there to other companies. Are you naturally a good presenter? So she's naturally like, get me in front of the camera, like all about it. And I'm like shrinking inside when that's me. So do you have
I will say, I think so. I'm comfortable with that. Now, whether I can watch this, I don't know.
So, I feel like there's a difference between being comfortable and like naturally, like that's what you're drawn to. It's like, I feel comfortable with it now, but like naturally it took a lot of practice for me. Like at a young age, I definitely was not. But when you first started out your career, was that something you were like, happy? Like, did you enjoy those kind of moments or?
So I did. I mentioned growing up in South Georgia, my dad for most of my childhood was a Southern Baptist pastor of a church. So back then, being a preacher was very robust and dynamic. And what all he did on a daily basis is a little different than churches do it now. One's not better than the other, but he used to have to do a radio show at 7:30 a.m.
Whoa.
He did, every weekday. He did hospital visitations. He obviously did funerals and weddings. And he was the center of that church and the relationships.
That community per se.
That's right. Cool. So I would stay back with him even as a kid and shake hands at the back door and meet people and go on all the trips with the
That's helpful.
people.
Getting your kids exposed to that kind of stuff is very helpful. We've talked about it before because she was always, with her or their dad and shaking hands and talking to people.
Exposed to that.
As a 13-year-old talking to adults and stuff, whereas I didn't have that experience, so I was pretty nervous about it at first. But I don't know. That's cool that you had that experience.
Yes, that definitely helped me. So standing up in front of crowds and talking, whether I'm prepared or not, typically I do pretty well. Now, am I super hard on myself after and critique, how I did? Yes, but
that's
for the most part, I'm comfortable talking or delivering a message.
Which that's a great segue into some research that Heath did. So just reading off his research, it seems that you managed a $500 million portfolio in 2005 with Citibank. So the curiosity for us is how comfortable was it for you to manage that portfolio and lead that strategy? And that kind of goes right into what we were saying and how comfortable you are leading.
Sure. So, you're always nervous when it's that big of a territory. At the time, went up, we called it the Mid-Atlantic. So it went up to Delaware, over to Kentucky, and then down to the Carolinas.
It's a big area.
So it's a big area. I had a team that was between 7 and 11 people at any given moment. Obviously, in big banks, there's always consolidation. So I picked up Florida and Georgia at one point during that. But I think, the ironic part now as I sit here in 2025, 20 years later, that number's small. It's amazing how big the numbers are now and how it was hundreds of billions of dollars later at Wells Fargo. But I think your point is valid. It's intimidating to be, moderately young in your career, have a lot of people reporting to you that ranged in age from, early 60s to early 30s.
Right. Older than you.
Older than me. For the most part, most of the time in my career until fairly recently, I was always one of the youngest ones. So oftentimes I was managing people that were significantly older than me, had significant more life experience. And I just learned, again, back to the relationship side, that my job was to make sure that they knew I was willing to do anything I asked them to do, number one. Number two, that I was there to clear obstacles for them, that I wanted them to be the most successful. I did not have an ego about whether one of them made more money than me, outperformed each other. I just, to me, a rising tide lifts all boats, and you want all of your team excelling and you being a part of that. And then everything sort of comes along after that.
So that sounds to me like great leadership characteristics. Where would you say that you learned those?
Oh gosh, I have to give credit to to family and
Nice.
to early experiences.
Yeah.
Nice.
My dad was a leader. I did play sports. I give credit to that. I played for an old school South Georgia football coach.
Nice.
Uh,
What
so-
position were you?
So I was a quarterback.
Nice, yeah.
So leadership is forced on you. You got
Yeah.
to know your
He
job.
was too.
I think that's one of the greatest positions in all of sports. Like you take the blame when things are going wrong. It's like leading a business, essentially. It's very similar. Yeah.
That's right. And at any point in your career as an athlete, a team sport wise, you have to be ready whether you're a starter or not. And I think I learned that as well early on as, having a lot of success going from middle school to high school and being on teams with a lot of great players. And sometimes you're one of the great ones and sometimes you're not.
Yes,
So,
it's hard to transition
right.
from being one of the best to not.
that's right. So all that applies, frankly, to lessons that I learned around leadership.
Nice.
Was sports, and then seeing it in family, and then early career. Like I mentioned, my first 3 jobs, I had probably more responsibility than maybe I deserved, frankly. So I
Nice.
learned from that a little bit of trial by fire, but had a good support system there of coworkers and frankly friends too.
So I know it definitely was not always easy throughout your career, and 2008 was a really tough year for a lot, especially those in finance.
It was.
Was that a challenge in your career, and how did you get through some of those obstacles if it wasn't?
Yes, no, it was unbelievably difficult. It's interesting. Usually, you hear "time heals all wounds." That is one that still can give me nightmares.
Really? Wow.
It was bad. We definitely in the finance and banking world had to lay off a lot of people. Many of us got laid off eventually ourselves. A lot of reorg, and so I went through that. I went through some scaling down of offices and having people, upset and crying that it's their job. Maybe a one working parent. Single mom.
That's like worst nightmare in the career world.
It was
Yeah.
very bad. So it was that, and then eventually, yes, I actually got let go as well because the organization I was with, it wasn't a big bank, ran out of money, and they couldn't fund things, and so eventually, if times don't turn, you have to thin out people.
Yeah.
So. I was fortunate that I made it through okay. We had a good network of friends and family. And one of my former bosses actually reached out on LinkedIn when LinkedIn was very new and just said, hey, looks like you're having a tough time. Will you talk to me about working with me? So
Oh, nice.
again, a life lesson for
That's
people is you got to maintain relationships because you never know when they come back around.
That's
True.
a blessing right there. Wow.
Yes. So I was very fortunate. So,
What is your mindset whenever, like, I don't want to curse on the podcast per se, but like whenever it's like fire, just like when shit hits the fan per se, and the worst of the worst has happened, ultimate nightmare when it comes career wise, like how do you bounce back from that? What are you thinking? What's the next step? Like kind of what's your mindset there?
Well, it's super hard. I think number one, you internalize very quickly and you think, did I make the wrong decision coming to this organization? What did I do wrong? What could I have done better? Those kind of things. And I think for me, it was, I had a good family behind me that was depending on me, 2 fairly young girls at the time, and a wife that needed me to get out of it. So I think some of it is you internalize and then you just kind of plow through. You lower your head and shoulders and plow through. And so I was willing to do whatever I needed to do. I was going to go work at Home Depot or deliver pizzas or whatever because I did know it was short term. So the last thing I will say is you still got to have the ultimate confidence in yourself and your abilities and realize that circumstances come and they're often very much out of your control. And while I think the natural inclination is to internalize and feel sorry for yourself and get way down, you got to wallow for a little bit and then you got to get out of it and you got to move on. And so you've got to engage people and work your network and know that it's not you in most circumstances.
That's great. Shifting gears a little bit with the growth of the bank now, and you just mentioned how you're hiring on. We touched on this earlier, but what traits are you looking for in a candidate that you want to hire?
Sure. So work ethic is super important to me. The desire to succeed personally, but also to jump in, roll up your sleeves, and do whatever's needed for the organization. Sometimes that's rolling down the trash can,
Right.
before because we forgot the night before.
Right.
Other times it's staying late, working on a presentation, or hosting a happy hour, or networking. But to me, it's drive, and along that, there's subsets that are important to me. I think character and ethics are very important. There's no shortcuts, and I think people that take shortcuts often end up being burned,
Right.
because there's typically either an ethical or something issue that goes on. So I think character is very important. And then the last thing I look for is a willingness to learn. I think
That's
people
big,
that sit across from you and think they know every single thing, that's typically a red flag.
Yeah.
I enjoy people that talk about, I want to learn, because then sort of what I mentioned earlier is then you can position them in various places and they'll succeed because they've got the character and the drive
Nice.
to do it.
So you talked about earlier too about like previously in your past not having an ego, like not being bothered if your teammates made more money than you. And from sitting here talking with you, I can tell you don't have an ego, like very down to earth, like enjoy the conversation a lot.
Yeah.
How do you deal with other people when you're working with others that do have egos and that gets in the way of productivity at the job?
Sure. I've found you have to hit it head on. You have to talk very transparently to people, especially if you're a leader. And oftentimes, even as a peer, frankly, I think that team chemistry is really important. And if you want your team and that individual to succeed, you have to talk about strengths and weaknesses with them. And you have to bring up that fact. So I can tell you, I am super driven. I want to be number one, but I do it in a little bit different and softer way. I'm not the guy on the pickleball court on the weekends smiking old ladies. I want to succeed in business and in life, and I'm very, very driven. But I don't let that interfere with relationships and interpersonal dynamics. And frankly, people that do, I just try to sit down and talk to them and let them know the reality is you need a little bit of ego to be successful. But too much tips the balance to bad team chemistry. Then you make decisions for different reasons. Do you sell people things they don't need? And you see scandals in the banking world all the time, and they're centered in that. They're centered in too much ego, too much drive, too much greed. So I just typically try to talk about it head on, and hopefully I've got a good enough relationship with the person that they see I'm coming from a place of sincerity, and I'm not trying to knock them down a peg. I'm trying to lift us all up with their help.
Does it always go well though?
No, of course not. No, because big ego means sometimes the meeting is heated, and you have difficult conversations, and you leave wondering. But if you've hired the right person and character has been in that trait, typically they come back, whether it's the next day or a week later, and say, I'm sorry, I've reacted this way.
That's big. If someone does that, that's a good sign.
Most of the time, I really can't think of many that didn't end up that way. Now, again, not in the moment, and you can certainly agree to disagree. And, sometimes as a leader or as a boss, you have to pull that card. But to me, it's better to talk about it and let them come to the realization through experience or time than to force someone to do it.
Gotcha.
That's great. What does this season and the next chapter look like for you? You mentioned how most of your career you were younger and leading people older than you. You said now it's a little different. So what is this season and kind of the future look like?
Sure. So Encore's given me a great opportunity to take some of the relationships I've built over my career, especially in the Carolinas, and do a new venture where I've also learned a whole bunch, and we feel like we're providing a unique bank to the market, to the Carolinas. So we think that's going to be attractive. So I think the immediate next step is to continue to get this off the ground and do a fabulous job and continue to learn. But growing the bank, so really digging in and making it. That's right. That's a priority. Good. At the same time, it's to invest in other people. I have some younger leaders, younger in their career and by the calendar, the birthday. But I think it's also to invest and empower them for their next thing. There's a great chance I have another bank left in me, depending on what happens with Encore. Certainly, we know it happens to successful banks. They're acquired or they acquire. Either way may lend to further
Sure.
down the road for them, or it may end the road for them
Sure.
there. So it just depends on how that looks. But I think to be able to do it with people that I enjoy working with is really what I want to do. And then, yes, obviously I want to be able to retire and do all the fun things that you work all these years.
Yeah,
to
you
get.
can go play the pickleball that you mentioned earlier.
That's right.
Nice.
That's great.
We'll end it up here soon, but you talked about how you're pursuing excellence, how you are very driven, how you are very fueled. Where does that come from? Like, not everybody has that. What does push you to be the best?
I don't know. That's probably a great psychologist question that I could go back to. I've got some ideas on it.
Yeah.
So I think number one, early on, I saw successful parents, I saw successful friends, and I didn't want to let people down. My dad had a lot of responsibility early on in his life. My grandparents were hard workers, smart people, but hard workers. So I saw a family work ethic.
So it was modeled around
It was
you.
modeled
Yeah.
around me, certainly.
good.
My sisters are younger, but both very, very driven as well.
Okay.
So I think some of it was the demand of not wanting to let people down in the drive. The second thing I think happened is hard work. And I, like most middle school and high school boys, I got in my share of trouble. And after one event that cost my parents a little money, they put me in the tobacco field.
Nice,
And
yeah.
I worked tobacco in the summer. And so I think,
In South Georgia, that summer is not easy.
it's hard work, it's hot, and I think it does two things. Number one, it says, do you want to do this for the rest of your life? Because
Yeah.
you can absolutely do that, and it's at times a great living, but it's a hard living.
Sure.
So
I'm sorry. That's my diabetes device going off.
That's okay.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, it's expired or expires soon.
That's okay.
We'll take that out.
Is it-
All good. We're good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Continue.
So I think that's a drive thing too. What do you want to do?
So going to the tobacco fields, though,
tobacco
my dad grew up working the tobacco fields, and my granddad was a farmer. So we have that in our family line. We're very aware that he said, I don't want to be doing this when I'm older. And that's what kind of gave him drive to do more.
It's hard, but I also think besides the kind of the easy, okay, I don't want to work manual labor, my whole life. The reality is, I also was given a little responsibility there because I went back in year 2 on my own, not as punishment.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Again, because one, the money was good.
Sure.
Number 2, I got to work with some of my best friends. We had a lot of the football team out there doing it.
That's cool.
And I think the pride of accomplishing, seeing that field day one and all you had to do, and then at the end, what the hard work, how you accomplished it, I think was powerful. And I'll never forget, the field was huge. I don't know how many acres. And that second year, I was in charge of driving the picker and getting it in the line and then going down and cropping.
Yeah.
And I ran over 2 plants. And the boss man, Curtis, came out and said, who ran over these 2 plants? And I said, I did. He said, I can't have people running over plants. And I'm sitting here thinking, he's got this huge field.
Yeah,
These
there's
2
only
don't
2.
matter.
Yeah.
I didn't do it on purpose.
Yeah.
But that also speaks to you as an impressionable kid, 15, 16, 17 years old, that excellence matters and the drive to make sure the reason he was successful, and I looked up to him, he was a county commissioner, was he cared about the little things and the big things. So I think that was it. And then finally, I mentioned work experience. I think just working for companies and seeing what hard work does, how you can elevate yourself, and frankly, how you learn. One of the most fascinating things that I get to do now in my career that I appreciate more than I did when I was younger is that I get to talk to all these different people that have started businesses or inherited businesses or bought businesses or split off for businesses, and they have all figured it out in one way or another. And to sit with them and learn how they do it, how they think, all the different ways to approach the way to make money has been fascinating to me. So
That's cool.
I think that's part of that drive too, is you want to talk to as many people so you can give the best advice possible. And so if you're not driven to be great, you're not going to remember all that, and you're not going to be as additive in your daily
Yeah, I can say that's part of the goal of the podcast, to learn different stories, different ways people made business, grew business, made money, and that sort of thing. So that definitely does help with the drive. I guess.
It does.
Yeah. Well, we'll end it with this, but we like to ask guests at the very end, what's the best advice that you were ever given as you navigated your career? Maybe you received it from a mentor, maybe I'm sure the tobacco fields might have taught you a lesson or two, but is there anything that comes to mind?
So I think the one that sticks out to me is not to get too high or too low. The consistency matters.
It's quarterback right there.
That's probably
throw a pick. You can't get all upset with the interception because you got another drive to come out for.
That's right. That's probably true, and I think that's true in business as well. You get the big sale and you're high-fiving and you're celebrating. If you back off, you're not going to be successful down the road. In banking and in most sales and relationship-based sales, your wins today didn't come from efforts yesterday. It came from consistent effort months and even years ago. And so if you're not consistently adding new names to your hopper, they're not coming through the sales funnel. So old-fashioned sales management to me was manifested in just being consistent. Don't get too high or too low.
I love that. That's great advice. Well, Michael, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast. It was a very insightful and a fun conversation.
Thank you, Michael. We appreciate it.
Thank you.